that is right. This is the village.
Yeah.
He owns all this land all the way back in here, and he's got the frontage between the two buildings. So, I mean, a lot of this is wetlands, you can see this is all wetlands here, so there isn't a lot he can do with it, but he owns a lot of property. That should,
Just waiting to get let in.
might be made.
There we go.
Where's the gas?
No, that's it. So Main Street Bank must be on this parcel. Village Realty, yeah. The bank is on that property.
I always wondered if there was, I was also thinking, I didn't know how big the piece is, the gas station piece. What's it say?
Looks like 2/10 of an acre.
Because I was thinking that was on that.
Yeah, it doesn't
Can't
give
be
you much.
done. I know.
The other
It's too bad.
thing we missed out on the big time.
Mr. Cassidy, if you can hear me, can you pass host over to me, please?
Is that piece. Pass on.
Okay.
Thank you.
You could let him be host too if you want.
That'd be fantastic. You want to run the meeting and he can host?
I don't know how I managed to get that.
Got superpowers.
I think when Heidi left, she just passed it over to you automatically.
Okay.
We all set in the booth? Thank you. Oh. There we go. Okay.
Recording in progress.
There we go. All right, it is.
Mr. Waters, can you confirm you're the host?
It doesn't look like it just yet,
Hmm.
but I can still share my screen and all that stuff. That's fine. I don't mind. Not a problem.
Until he drops.
Exactly. Well, then it would fall to me anyways. All right, it is 7:03 p.m. and I am calling the Lunenburg Finance Committee public hearing to order. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. The following information is provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely, excuse me for 1 second, I'm letting people in. To participate remotely, from a computer, please use the link attached to the agenda on the town calendar. From a telephone, dial the toll-free number 888-475-4499 and enter webinar ID 827-6821-8897. This agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions, and not all items listed may in fact be discussed. May not be discussed, may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. So as our agenda calls, at 7 o'clock, we're going to open the public hearing, so we'll take a motion to do so.
You want to do that before public comment?
I'm doing public comment at the end, just because we have to open at 7, because that's when it was published and the letter was sent out.
Make a motion to open public hearing?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are in public hearing. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, now, 7:05 p.m., public comment. Is there any public comment from the committee?
Sure. So just a reminder to everyone that might be watching tonight, we still have 2 empty seats on this board. We're entering budget season, and having those filled is kind of critically important. It just, if 2 of us are ill and can't attend, then we can't hold a meeting, and The timeline is pretty tight. A lot of people go through a lot of preparation for those meetings, and to delay them can cause a lot of problems. So that would be the public comment I have.
Thank you. Is there any public comment from the public? Seeing none, let's move on into our first appointment. So let me pull up the warrant articles. All right, so for this evening, I have invited the Select Board, the Police Department, the School Department, and the School Committee, as well as the Parks Department, to discuss some of the articles that were put into the warrant that I feel are at least going to have some type of monetary impact. So therefore, I wanted to have a chance for us to have a discussion with them and for the public to also have a discussion with them before the Finance Committee has our vote at the end of this meeting. So to get started, we are going to, as the current version of the warrant article states, Article I is to see if the town will vote to transfer a sum of money from the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund to pay for a new ambulance to replace Rescue 1 and 2 new dump trucks to replace 2 decommissioned dump trucks or take any other action relative thereto. So this was submitted by the town manager. It's primarily pushed forward by the Select Board, so I've invited Chairman Jeffries to give us some help with this.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Michael Ray Jeffries, Chairman of the Lunenburg Select Board. Thank you for having me with you tonight. I have a little bit of lengthy opening comments, but I'm anticipating some questions and I'm trying to answer them in advance. To best understand why the Select Board has put an article into this year's special town meeting to fund an ambulance and 2 dump trucks with special purpose stabilization funds, a fund that was established to purchase costly vehicles such as these, I think we need to be on the same page about what ARPA, or more specifically, CLFRF funds are and how the town can use them. To explain, the federal government's American Rescue Plan Act, also known as ARPA, includes a program titled the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. ARPA provides a $350 billion investment into state, territories, counties, cities, and tribal governments. Of this, $195.3 million was established in the CSLFRF, or Coronavirus State Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, to aid in the recovery from the coronavirus pandemic by providing resiliencies into our public resources and funding for other government functions. It follows the CARES Act, which separately was an infusion of federal dollars to reimburse all additional government costs associated with supporting the public health emergency, including staff overtime, materials, office supplies, personal protective equipment, and other related costs. Through the American Rescue Plan Act, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts received $8.7 billion and distributed $3.4 billion to municipalities and functional counties through the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, or CLFRF. The town of Lunenburg received $3.5 million. The Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund that the town received has 4 eligible use categories. First, to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. 2, to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers. 3, for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year prior to the emergency. And 4, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Lunenburg does not have the type of costly public infrastructure that municipalities with large populations do. So most of our public health and safety costs didn't skyrocket, and those that increased were mostly reimbursed by the CARES Act. There was also some operational savings when buildings were closed to staff and the public. The result is that the pandemic did not have a negative impact on the town's coffers. It was quite the opposite. Through the strength of the town manager's conservative budget planning and the generally healthy financial position of the town and its residents, the town received its expected revenue and had record amounts of money available to invest in our local capital projects. This was $1.68 million in fiscal year 22 and $2.16 million for fiscal year 23. The $3.5 million that the town received through CLFRF or ARPA is uniquely similar to a grant in that it does not require an appropriation from town meeting to distribute. Rather, the distribution of funds is through the executive, which in our town is the select board. The select board approached this deliberatively. We engaged in a public process that solicited and invited requests from community organizations, multi-member bodies, and departments. The board discussed the criteria, and all members received emailed links to CSLFRF Department of Treasury program overviews. After screening the list of requests, we invited every requester under consideration to provide a detailed presentation before the select board. The select board was flexible and considered new requests beyond the submission deadline last summer, and we took weeks and up to a year to make determinations. The first eligible use is to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts. The board evaluated that businesses were eligible for greater funding through other government programs, that households were supplemented by enhanced unemployment benefits, and that we would make funding available to local nonprofits. The select board provided $20,000 for the Lunenburg Food Pantry, the exact amount they requested, and $75,000 to the Lunenburg Boys and Girls Club. Since we were able to fill scheduling needs with overtime and those costs were reimbursed through the CARES Act, the board committed $15,241 for public safety staff hours and COVID-19 tests, and an additional $6,929.50 for remote meeting cost and consulting, and $50,750 for public safety equipment. The second eligible use is premium pay to eligible workers. The select board decided not to provide premium pay. In short, the list of eligible employees is expansive and includes what seems like every occupation that interacted with another person or participated in commerce. Grocery store employees, mortuary affairs professionals, laundromat staff, dentists, clinicians, pharmacists, maintenance personnel, sanitation workers, public health employees, municipal employees, election workers, and school employees, and so on. The select board decided not to be arbiters of who performed the most noble and needed services. I'd like to come back to the third eligible use. The fourth eligible use is to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. The select board committed $285,000 to the water district to perform PFAS public education, a PFAS master plan, and a treatment pilot at the Keating well. We also committed $100,000 to replace sewer manhole covers. We are permitted to expend funds on program management, and given the complexity of the rules and filings, we hired a company to assist us for $60,000. The legislation also identifies the ways in which these funds can't be expended. We can't decrease taxes and offset the reduction with CLFRF funds. We can't save it and put it into a reserve account or invest the funds in a pension fund. We can't use the money to pay off debt or replenish our reserve accounts. We can't use it to pay legal settlements, and we can't use it for reasons that contravene with the purpose of the money, like throwing an anti-COVID-19 in-person party with a buffet of food and shared drinks at a time when the CDC was recommending masks and social distancing. So I said I was going to come back to the third eligible use, which, to state it again, is for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to the COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year prior to the emergency. As I've noted, the town didn't actually experience a loss of revenue. However, within the legislation and follow-up rules, Congress and the Department of Treasury says there are two ways for a municipality to calculate its lost income. One, you take a $10 million allowance, no proof necessary. Two, you perform a complicated formula. And for that first $10 million of lost income, you can spend it on anything that a government would otherwise spend money on. I'm sure you can imagine which option we took. Since the town received $3.5 million, All of it counts toward the first 10 million of the standard allowance for lost income and can be used for general government services. And so the Select Board committed $150,000 to support the tax abatement process, $30,000 to supplement appropriation for the Board of Assessors revaluation, $81,054 to replace the failed camera system at the Public Safety Building, $1 million to support the rehabilitation of Marshall Park, $50,000 for the school department to perform an athletic field survey, $101,640 to build new sidewalks from Turkey Hill Elementary School to Turkey Hill Road and from Highland Street down Chestnut to Marshall Park, $22,500 to support the Culture Council's Artists in Schools initiative, $120,000 to renovate the teen room in the library, $60,000 for exterior repairs to the library, $10,000 to restore the memorial garden at the library, and $225,000 for the Municipal Building Design Committee. The capital planning process in town has historically prioritized public safety, and the town specifically reserves funds for large vehicles. The Select Board committed funds to expedite the purchasing of 2 dump trucks and an ambulance prior to the start of the fiscal year, so that way we wouldn't have to wait in an even longer line that starts on July the 1st when municipalities spike demand for commonly needed goods. Early last winter, we were down 4 large plow vehicles out of our 7, and the 2 on order had an expected delivery in 2024. We were advised that an order in July would likely arrive in late 2025. Also, our town has 2 working ambulances, and we lost 1 due to an accident for almost half the year. Again, the backlog to manufacture and retrofit one had us on course for a 2025 or later delivery if ordered after July. The Select Board did not believe that these purchases were a best use, but we had no doubt that the normal appropriation process would result in a diminished ability for our town to meet the needs of our residents. Also, given the many uncertainties earlier in the year on the cost of abatements, the Select Board intended to ensure that we would remain in a healthy cycle of capital investments and deferred for another day this question. Well, today is that day. So had we not have experienced the tax debacle of this year, we would have likely experienced another record year of free cash, and these vehicle purchases would have been included in the capital plan. Instead, we diverted the money that would have been used to purchase these vehicles to the Board of Assessors to provide our neighbors and friends with needed relief, which ended up being $1.3 million. We ask for your recommended approval of Article I, as I think it's written today, at the special town meeting. The town specifically reserves funds for large vehicle purchases, and these plow trucks and this ambulance should have been paid for through the funds reserved for this purpose or through the capital plan. The availability of $986,000 will enable the Select Board to continue to consider furthering the legislative intent of CLFRF funds, investing in water and sewer, better supporting community organizations, and supporting community and government needs. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Just to kind of go over my intention for how I expect this to work, I would like to have the committee to have a chance to ask questions and to have a discussion, and then I would welcome public comment, public questions as well, just to try and get at least a little bit of a dialogue going. But so please direct everything through the chair for the public comment. And so for now, I'll open up to the committee for questions, comments.
All right, I'll go. So fiscal year 24 through 33 capital requests, many of which the items that were funded by ARPA were not even identified on there, currently stands at $34.6 million. Line items associated with the fire department, which included replacement rescue 1, over the next 9 years, it also includes radios, is $4.5 million. So if we take $986,000 back out of that reserve fund, I think the balance would be down over just $1 million something. We're looking at $3 million worth of unfunded items approximately through the fire department, on top of $34 million, which is part of the $34 million in that capital plan, which, as we all know, probably does not include adequate coverage for bridges and culverts, stormwater problems we're having in town, et cetera. So all of this is by which to say, we have a process in town. I tried to be part of a group that changed that process slightly, that capital items could be changed on the floor of government. But we all doubled down. In fact, the select board said that we need to trust that process. So trusting that process, I think the remaining funds from ARPA, which are, if we don't return this, which is not much, should be dedicated towards capital requests. I think it's fiscally irresponsible for the town to not put all these money towards capital requests or items that are kind of ahead of us. And I understand that you went through a deliberate process in as much as everything that you did as part of this meets the criteria of the funding, but I don't have an understanding of what you would do with $986,000 if it were to be returned to you. So my preference would be to take the 986 that was allocated to these as a sound decision for monies that was given to us. $10 million for general government allowed, and start to focus going forward on really deliberate actions related to capital plans, buildings, and other improvements in town. So that's kind of where I stand on this, having thought about it for quite a while, so.
Well, it sounds first like you support the request, which is a good thing. You just have a requested use for it. Am I hearing this correctly?
I don't know that I do support the request, because I think what it comes down to is, in essence, 3 members of town, meaning 3 of 5 select board members, just can decide on almost $1 million worth of funding. Whereas I think leaving it the way it is, we can go through a process of looking through the capital plan, deliberating like we do as a town through open hearings, through going through the select board, through going through the capital planning committee, and using the process that we all kind of know. I also think that, some of these items that kind of came up through this could be considered unknown expenses, emergency expenses, those sort of things. And last week we talked with town manager about the fact that we have a reserve fund as well. And we fund it at about $75,000 a year. Perhaps that's underfunded. Perhaps emergencies going forward, unknowns, could be higher than that. And there is a process for using that as well, which is that the need is identified. I think it goes through the select board and it comes to finance committee for that kind of checks and balances, at which point we can allocate that money for something. We tend to use that to cover the overruns in snow removal, I think is what we tend to do every year. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think the ARPA money, to me, was kind of a nice gift that we don't often see within Lunenburg, because the nice gifts goes to other towns. But I think I kind of trust the process that's been in place, for decades, a little bit more so than this ARPA process. So I would recommend a no, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Okay. So
it's not that I don't trust any individual, right?
I would take a shot at persuading you and your colleagues. First, let me clarify that we are not Congress, and we don't get to decide the rules for the distribution of ARPA. Had I been a member of Congress, I highly doubt that I ever would have voted for this. So I'm just going to throw that out there, right? But I don't work for Congress. I work for the residents of Lunenburg. And, what these funds are, and well, what they're not, is they are not capital funds distributed across all municipalities in the United States. That I think if the federal government wanted us to receive an infusion of capital funds, then they would probably call it the United States Capital Improvement Fund. But instead, what they identified was a coronavirus fiscal recovery fund instead. And they created specific uses for its purpose. I think too often what governments do when they receive money that's intended for other purpose, whether it's opioid relief funds or et cetera, is that they take the money for their own personal use instead of looking at what those intents were. I think that what we have is we have a sewer department that needs investment. They have pumps, they have a whole bunch of other stuff that needs real investment, and the government provided funds for that purpose. We have a water district that is now looking at a significant cost as it relates to PFAS and the removal of PFAS from the public water supply. They have changing standards, and so the government has provided funds specifically for that purpose. These funds could be used to support, we see right now with the Lions Club Food Pantry, an explosion in the amount of residents who are taking advantage of those services. I spoke with Nancy earlier today, and she mentioned that they're roughly going through about $2,700 a month in needed donations to keep the program running. They need an infusion, and this is money that was specifically set aside for that purpose. I think that while we have the ability to say, hey, Congress, you say that we can use money if we lost revenue, which, by the way, we didn't actually lose, and you can say we can use up to $10 million for that purpose, what I believe the Select Board has done is very deliberately looked at different programs that otherwise wouldn't be funded. If we did not have ARPA funds this year, as an example, we would have needed to call a special town meeting to raise and appropriate the funds to address the crisis at hand. I mean, we estimated that process alone would have taken 6 to 8 weeks at best. Meanwhile, residents needed relief pretty immediately. So to your point about a reserve fund, I think it does highlight the need for perhaps more funding for reserve, but I'd say a higher priority is staff need more money and staff need more pay. And maybe next year is the year to increase reserve fund, maybe 2025 is the year to increase reserve funds, and perhaps next year is the year to improve staff wages. We know that we have people who are underpaid by market analysis by 20%. I think town clerk market analysis, it's almost 50%, 40%. That to me is higher priority, but not to get too off topic. I think that with these funds, I hear you, Chris, and I don't ordinarily disagree with that standing. I think if the government had have given us money that was unrestricted, then we would not be beholden to their rules. But in this case, we are. I think that the capital needs for our town will be addressed. And as a separate point, too often when we think about revenue, we think about the taxpayer and how much we can get out of the taxpayer. And something that the Select Board, if you've heard me in a recent meeting mention, is that we are engaging right now a consultant to look at solar panels in the Old Town dump. Now, what this will do is generate millions of dollars for the town, millions of dollars for the town in coming years. And so, right now, the lens that we have of looking at, I think we have to have confidence in our abilities tomorrow, have confidence in our abilities in 5 years from now, to address the needs of 5 years from now, to address the needs of 10 years from now. And I think that the Select Board and its executive authority is helping the town move in that direction, so that way we can find sources of revenue to address building needs, capital needs, that aren't just restricted by the 2.5% that we can get from the tax base every year. And I think the residents expect that from us.
Yeah, so I agree with you on the operating budgets. I agree with you on perhaps salaries is the reason and benefits is the reason we're losing, where, we have a dozen critical. So I think that just compounds the problem of the fiscal, perhaps hill we face ahead of us. It's not just capital items, it is buildings, it is operating expenses, et cetera. So, and I also think that Congress at a federal level has very little clue what Lunenburg needs, because Beacon Hill doesn't even understand what Lunenburg needs. So I do go towards, it's nice that they wanted some aspects of this dedicated to certain things. But in the end, I think we've got to be deliberate in our thinking on this, and it should go through the normal processes, not again, $986,000, are we looking to give it to a self-funded sewer and water department? Those are supposed to be self-funded organizations, they're enterprise funds.
Well, regardless of whether or not they're self-funded, I mean, the federal government specifically provided money for water and sewer departments, regardless of whether or not they were enterprise funds, regardless of whether or not they were supplemented by departments. And I think that it's a fair statement to say that the water district cannot go through our normal capital process, that they're eligible for any kind of capital funds from the town.
But
And
they
so
can
this
raise
is an
the rates on they're, just like my rates get raised on sewer and water.
But we're all serving the
PFAS
same
comes onto
residents.
my land.
I don't disagree with you, but we're all serving the same residents. And I think, one of the issues that you've raised privately as a citizen is like the water issues that's going on in Flat Hill and the need for there to be some kind of funding for that. And I'll tell you, I'm not on the capital planning committee, but if we start dropping, $500,000 of pipes down Flat Hill and my drives around town, that's not the only place in town that's having water issues. But what this funding allows is it allows us to be targeted in how we approach some of these problems. That, we can then allocate some funds for, Flat Hill that ordinarily would not go through the capital planning process, in my view, because the demand is everywhere, right? And so not everything, if we look at the history of what makes it through capital planning, when you have something like the sewer department saying we need new manhole covers and the police department saying, or fire department saying we need a new ambulance, the new ambulance is getting purchased, and everyone else is being told everything else can wait. And so what ARPA is, it's an opportunity to do things that are not the ordinary capital planning way. And I think that we were successful. The Artisan Schools program, I wasn't necessarily an enormous fan of that, but it is something that the majority of the board supported, and there's no way that would have gotten through capital planning. And so, ARPA is an opportunity for us to invest in the needs of our community, and I would just I would encourage a more broad view. That the capital planning process is a great process for the town of Lunenburg, but these funds are not capital planning funds.
All right.
Sounds like I haven't moved you, Chris.
I don't think you have.
Are there any other questions from any other members? Well, thank you for your time, and I'm going to step to the side in case anyone from the public has a question.
Ron DeLucia, 181 Reservoir Road. I completely agree with the Vice Chair's comments. Before he began speaking, I had written down I would need to know how much is currently in the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund. I would need to review the future capital needs of both the fire and the DPW for these big ticket items. And also, it's my recollection at the last year's capital planning presentation by fire that the ambulances have been getting more use due to an increased number of calls. So what I'm saying is I would rather keep those items funded, not drain down that account, so we have money to buy these big ticket items when we need them without borrowing. I think it was a wise choice to spend that money, the ARPA funds on that in the first place, and I don't see any reason to change that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor Swan? I think Chris, Vice Chair Menard, I think you made a comment pretty early on that was right, which is that these funds are seen as a gift. So I would argue back. We should not be depending on gifts to buy our ambulances and dump trucks. Period, full stop. We need to be prepared to fund those through the ordinary budgeting process. That what happened here was the select board took the opportunity to use the gift to ensure that the residents would not have an interrupted experience when it comes to the receipt of ambulances and dump trucks. But we should not be relying on those funds to do these things. We were not relying on those funds to do these things. What happened again was we needed to divert funds to support the assessment process this year. The board very easily could not have done this, But our decision to do this was with the understanding that we had a reserve fund, was with the understanding that these funds have been set aside for this purpose, and that this would be a possibility for us to come back and say, we've ordered these parts, now let's make sure these vehicles, and let's make sure that these are funded through the ordinary process.
Yeah, so if I just can respond to that, there's no doubt that I'm fiscally conservative, right?
So am I.
Yeah. But, and the one thing that really gets me, and I kind of draw analogies to my own personal finances or anyone's personal finances. There's often times when, if you're faced with $25,000 of credit card debt, you got a mortgage that you're not paying, you got a car that needs repair and your tires are about to blow out, and someone says, here's a gift of $5,000. You don't say, that's great, let me go on a vacation, right? So I think we really got to focus on the fiscal aspects of the town. I don't want to argue with it whether I would or wouldn't have done every one of these on here. You know that there are some that I wouldn't. We can get past whether we should have given money to an enterprise fund. That's fine. I guess that enterprise fund helps the town municipal anyways. But I just think going forward, the $986,000 just has to be treated like it's free cash and not just come up with some great ideas, and we can fund them. If you have the great ideas, get them on the table because we really have to get our 10-year plan understood. Again, it's not just capital, it's operating expenses, it's infrastructure, I guess that's capital, but how we fund the government, like you said, not just taxes, how do we get revenue? I'm all for all that. Mm-hmm. So let's work together, as a finance committee, I'm a member of the capital planning committee, the building design committee, et cetera, on what's our future, which we'll get to the next item I wanted to talk about, which is the roof, but that's my view on it, so.
Chris, I don't disagree with that last comment in full. I only disagree with it in part. So, the opportunity that I think these funds will provide is we have some real needs, right? We know that 30 School Street needs some investment. We know that there's needs in municipal buildings. We know all this stuff. And I think that these funds provide that opportunity to, in many ways, ARPA has supplemented things that ordinarily would have happened, but maybe would have taken a lot longer. I mean, $1 million for Marshall Park project. I think we both can agree. How long would that have taken to get through capital planning? How long? How many years would have passed? So I think in some cases we were able to help the process along and help fund things, and I just don't see that there's really much fat in where we spent money. I don't see a lot of waste. Again, I didn't necessarily agree with all the funding that we provided, but I think that 90% at least, I think, are things that were in line with the direction that the town's doing. When we think about the teen center, every family, everyone who has children benefits from that. Having a building with exterior repairs, we all benefit from that. Having a memorial garden rehabilitated in the center of our town, everyone benefits from that. $1 million for Marshall Park, that's a huge benefit. Sidewalk for the schools, that's a benefit. $50,000 for the athletic survey, that's a benefit. And so, I guess I just don't see that the capital planning process would have been equally, again, because we had that kind of mindset of things that maybe wouldn't make it through capital planning. I just want to reiterate that I think that what your request is to do things in line with the direction that the town is going in. I think that we can both agree that at least 90% we're on the same page.
I would agree with that.
All right.
I feel like we're in a debate,
I don't get this opportunity very often, I will say. Usually when I'm in one of these chairs, I don't say too much back, so.
I was about to have to bring it back and get it back. We don't care about the ARPA funding that's already happened.
Are there any other, I know you want to ask me about the roof, but are there any other, I want to just pause in case there's any other
I just
public.
have one question.
Yep.
Assuming that letter I, as it's written, is approved by the town, that'll give us $1 million
Roughly.
back into ARPA. What's on the table so far?
Yeah, so, we're aware, we are aware that the sewer department, they requested $500,000 in funding. They received $100,000. I think the majority of the board is I can't say this definitively, but there's a strong inclination to provide more funding to support the sewer department. We know that the water department is looking at a project, when all said and done, is going to be in the tens of millions of dollars likely. Anything we can do as far far as, rehabilitating all these wells. Anything we can do to offset that cost to our residents will be a benefit. And so I know there's desire and interest in reinvesting them there. The food pantry has come forward with this. We also need to get started on this project for the, getting the consultant on board with regard to the Old Town Dump. That's small money, roughly a $20,000 to $30,000 investment, but where it goes is, again, a multi-million-dollar return. And so, there's other areas, and again, we are going to create another process to open this up to nonprofits, community organizations in the town to kind of look at their prioritized needs and get them addressed. So, I would expect that will be similar to what happened before, but a little quicker. Because the funds do need to be committed by the end of next year and expended by 2026.
And just for clarification, I think you said water department, but you meant water district?
I meant water district.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Yeah, the water department is run by the select board. Yeah. Any additional questions? All right, you want to talk about the roof?
Let's talk about roofs.
Well, I'm here. So the bottom line on the roof is TC Passios building, and I've had this conversation with the school committee, with Superintendent Burnham, and with Chairwoman Carol Archambault, that when we look at some of the challenges we have in our town, and I've said this several times, that we don't so much have a problem with what to do with old town buildings, we have a problem with what to do with old schools. And that part of the planning for disposing of schools needs to also include, or building new schools, needs to include the disposition of the current school. So in Turkey Hill, TC Passios was turned over, and let me, before I go that direction, and that is why I certainly welcome the school department's engagement with us as the Municipal Building Design Committee talks about the future of TC Passios or the future of Turkey Hill, so that way we're having these conversations about disposition early enough in the process that we have a good comprehensive plan as we go forward, so we don't find ourselves in the position of having vacant schools and figuring out what to do with them in the future. But with regard to the roof, this building is being used. The superintendent's office is there. The before school and after school program is there. We all vote there. We store all of our records there. 80% of the building is in use. And in my view, whenever you have a building being used, it is not okay when we have 40 holes in that roof, and we have 40 active leaks inside of TC Passios or more. 20% of the building, again, is unusable and is contaminated with asbestos. It's not reasonable to say, until we figure out the disposition of this property, we're not going to fix the roof. We need to fix the roof. The roof should have been fixed probably 8 years ago. 765-432, it needs to be fixed now. And so what this does is it's funding to be able to support the central portion of the roof of the building primarily, which is where the school admin have their offices, which creates a better work environment. Also, again, children are in this building every single day. And so, yes, it's money for a building that we haven't identified definitively the disposition of, but we are an employer, and we have to be mindful of our employees. And if any of you want to work in a work condition where you have 40 leaks in your office, let me know now. But I don't know many people who do. And certainly our town staff don't. So it's just the right thing to do.
All right, so, sorry.
And the other point is, additional water damage is going to deteriorate the possibilities of what we can do in this building, period. And so we need to get the water to stop.
And also that building is going to be, could be used as a spot to put people as we do work on Ritter and this building here and other places. So it will have at least a short-term future of holding even more people.
Correct, and that's part of the intent, is that, as we go through a phase process with municipal building design, the way the phases are currently envisioned is that, phase 1 is Ritter building new town hall. And so, when we relocate we need to put staff somewhere while this is happening. And so we've identified this building as being the transitional space to help reduce additional costs in other areas. Renting out trailers are very costly.
Just to make sure everyone's up to speed with where we are now on Article F, to see if the town will raise an appropriate borrow or transfer a sum of money from available funds, a sum of money for repairs to the TC Passios building roof located at 1025 Mass Ave, or take any other action relative thereto. And on the shared screen, it is the section in green in the center of the building for just under $300,000 estimated.
Correct.
All right, so in the current building plan, municipal building committee's plan, what is the current thinking as it relates to this portion of the building?
Well, we are torn right now on what the ultimate disposition of this building would be, because we see that the schools need to consider an expansion or building of a new school with Turkey Hill in the coming years. And so the conversation that we have scheduled to have on Monday with them is where's the overlap here? And so I don't want to prejudge that conversation, but we are going to be discussing, does it really make sense to do the breadth of renovations to TC Passios if that comes up on a dollar amount or just space needs against what Turkey Hill may be able to offer or what's going to happen there. But currently the plan is to preserve a portion of that central portion of the building, a portion of that central portion of the building. I do not believe that all of it would be currently reserved in the current plans. So some of this money is going to go up, some of this may end up being demolished, but I mean, let's be realistic, right? I mean, how long is it going to take for us to come up with a plan? I hope the town votes on something in the spring, but if they don't, then how long is it going to take for us to get this roof to stop leaking? And how much more deterioration and damage is going to be caused while we're waiting for it to happen? So to me, $300,000, again, rehabilitating this building was a $30 million price tag. And so, I mean, water damage is costly.
In the plan, what is the plan, in the plan of record, for before and after school? Is it to go back into the schools that the children come from? Or is it to dedicate space for extended day?
Well, no, there would be no dedicated space for extended day in this plan. No. However, we understand, and we've had this conversation with the school committee, we understand that many, many, many parents rely upon this kind of program, before school and after school program. So I think that what we are looking at is for this plan to be temporarily relocated into one of the schools, but that whatever the long-term plan is with Turkey Hill, that we will address this need as part of that project. So we may be in a period where we have a 8 to 10 year stopgap, but hopefully, again, I don't want to prejudge the conversation we're going to be having with the school committee on Monday, but we very well could be at a point where there's a recognition that a school could be built somewhere else. And again, that's an option, right? And so if you end up building a school somewhere else and then Turkey Hill now becomes a available building, well, we would much rather have Turkey Hill than TC Passios. And Turkey Hill can be converted a lot better than TC Passios can be for community purposes. Turkey Hill is sitting in the corner of the parcel. Turkey Hill has separate access and egress into the property. So Turkey Hill offers a lot of benefits, and also because it's school purpose, that we could easily fit a lot of needs for the growing Boys and Girls Club, for the before school, after school program. The square footage allows for more to happen in that building. But I don't want to prejudge it, but we envision that there will be a period of time where the before school and after school program will need to return into the schools while we build out new space and then figure out its permanent home.
Yeah, I guess, the thing, again, this goes back to almost our first discussion on the previous article, but $300,000 is not insignificant, right?
Correct.
So putting $300,000 into a roof, only to see it then torn down within a few years, it is not a decision that I would make, again, as a homeowner, if I were to manage properties. And I think maybe that, there could be other alternatives, which is, let's close off that part of the building and start demolishing it. Let's consolidate. I think we got to get going on, this building design stuff. So maybe I'll reserve judgment towards trying to understand entirely what, the transition plan here is, and maybe I would recommend that we don't take a position on this, and maybe more information will come to light over the next month. Maybe lucky for you, I'm actually not able to attend town meetings, so I won't be a loud voice, but maybe some of the people in the audience will be my proxies. But that's my major problem with this, is that I just would hate to see $300,000 go towards something that is, you know, is then torn down. And then I asked a few folks.
Can I respond to that first part before you go to
Sure.
the next part?
Yeah.
You know, $300,000 is not a small amount of money. You know, part of the vision is that, you know, I want to quantify what a few years may be. You know, if we get into this process of rehabilitating these buildings, I would envision that building would need to be used for probably 4 at least more years. And so, I mean, 4 years, that's a long time to have a leaking roof with 40 holes in it. And I just, you know, I think that we have to think of ourselves as an employer, which we are, not just as residents, but as residents who employ people, and that we have to offer conditions that are acceptable. It is not acceptable to have people in a workspace in which there are this many leaks happening. That's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable when we have PAC has a studio in that central portion of the building, really expensive equipment with leaks in their room. It's just not acceptable. And so I think that I understand what you're saying, but I think we have to, it's a moral unfortunate. We should have done this a long time ago, but had we have done this many years ago, we probably would have replaced the whole thing. Now we're just looking to replace a portion of it. And with this, what $300,000 buys us is it buys us better work conditions. It buys us the ability to use this building as a transition space rather than spending, I think our estimates were almost $1 million for temporary spaces. So if $300,000 is going to save us $700,000, then I think we should spend $300,000. And I would urge the board to not defer until town meeting on this, and instead to make your recommendation and support today.
Do we know where the funding is coming from on this one? Is that in the article?
It is not.
Do you
I don't
know it?
recall, but I think that's one thing we'll have to get back to you on.
Madam Town Manager, go right ahead.
No. Yes, we discussed it at Tuesday's select board meeting. It is coming from the remainder of the funding that was not used for 30 School Street. We received an earmark from the state for that project, which we are receiving the reimbursement tomorrow, and that's $100,000. And there's also, so there'll be the funding that's in the fiscal 23 capital plan for the hazardous materials and demolition for that 30 School Street that will go towards this.
Okay.
That's the funding source.
As a light moment, I told the town manager that when a member of the select board goes in front of another committee, it always takes at least 45 minutes. I think we're on target there. But
I spoke to someone earlier today, you may imagine who it might be, who said, "Why do I have to go after?"
all right, any additional questions, Mr. Chair?
I know that the Municipal Building Design Committee we talked a lot about, I'm on that committee, we talked a lot about the roof and all that, and I agree with the chairman of the select board on this. The other part is that I remember with the old primary school, people were always, why didn't we do this? Why? I mean, ultimately, let's say we have to have part of that roof gets torn down in 4 years. That's the worst case scenario. But it could be that in 4 or 5 years, we decide that that's going to be something that we really want to use. And by doing that, we don't have to do a lot of other work to that building because of the water damage that has been caused over the next 4 years. So I think it's not only a sound use of the money based on the decisions that we've kind of made now, but it's also it's an insurance policy for the future if we need to use that or we decide to use that. It gives us more options. And it is a lot of money, but it's also, I think it's space is expensive, so we have to expect these things.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I think Dave had it.
Say one.
Mr. Passios?
Good evening. Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. In regards to the roof repair, I can remember the very first or second meeting of the TC Passios Redesign Committee, protecting the envelope of that building was thoroughly discussed. And, knowing that it would be a decade before anything happened with that building. And as is evident, with the exception of attempting to Band-Aid patch the roof, nothing's been done. Number of years before that, I don't have the dates on it or the years, there was money appropriated to reseal the seams on the roof on the entire building. That was supposed to buy us, I believe, 6 to 10 years maximum. And we're at the end of that already. Not protecting the envelope of that building at all is going to put it in a condition, if we keep running around in circles here, put it in the same condition as the old primary school was in the next 10 years. So I fully support, I would have supported doing more, but the central hallway with the description of what's going on there makes a lot of sense to me. Over history of that building, from the day it was built to the day we do something with it new, we've spent peanuts on that building. We built it for less than $3 million. And I would guess that we haven't spent much more than $3 million on it to maintain it for over 50 years, because we've done nothing in the last 25. So the only other comment I'd like to make is that if you don't mitigate the moisture getting into this building, eventually some employee that's working in that building is going to file a complaint. They're going to have a medical problem. All they got to do is file a complaint to the Board of Health, and then the town's going to have to relocate all those people, spend a lot of money on mold remediation. What happened here in Town Hall is a small example of what could happen at TCP if we don't start mitigating moisture getting into the building. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Town Manager?
Thank you. I just want to add on to that. So I was the one who put this article forth, and primarily because the facilities director is almost there weekly dealing with issues. And there's a lot of unusable space in that building due to prior leaks, and therefore caused the flooring to buckle, and we are out of space. So every space that we can maintain as usable space is key to the town and to the school. That's also over there, and community use. We have communities, groups requesting use of space over there on a consistent basis, and it's at a premium in town. So that was, just want to throw that out there, as well as for the last 7 years, the 7 years that I've been here, we've been talking about municipal buildings. And I would hate to see this to be deferred another 7 years and us to be keep pouring money into patching that roof that we know is way beyond its life expectancy.
Thank you.
So just one question. Mr. Passios mentioned envelope repairs, and I'm looking at the capital plan, the 10-year plan here, and I don't think I see any envelope items on the capital plan. Is this the last one that we have, or they just didn't make it into last year's plan?
No, I received your email just before the meeting, Chris. And,
yeah, that's fine.
So they should have been on last year's. I don't see them there either. They're all on the previous years as Vertex projects, because they were all identified by different years in the Vertex reports. And they included the whole host of repairs to that building, so including windows. I think it totaled in the Vertex report at that time was $4.5 million. And the roof was one of those repairs. There was the abatement, which was close to $1 million.
Okay, so you agree that they're not in the...
That should be in this coming year's capital plan for some reason. That was not shown on last year's.
Okay, so it sounds like there's $4.5 million in the one that I have in front of me, the one that you sent to the capital planning. It's actually in our drives if you guys want to see it. So the 34.6 million I mentioned earlier is actually closer to 39 million of requests. So. And one other question, I guess, for town manager, do you know the cost of a temporary office by square foot?
I do not, but I think Chairman Jeffries quoted that number earlier, as far as, because that was, I believe, part of what the Municipal Building Design Committee looked at for figures and what our previous architect provided in estimates when doing the costs for reconstruction of this building.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Any other public comment? All right. Let's move on to our 7:25 appointment.
I'm next.
You are next, correct. We welcome Chief Gamble. Let me.
I don't know if I'm worried more that I made the police chief late or my wife.
I promised to keep this short, I think. That's a tough act to follow, but I hope everybody had an opportunity to see my presentation to the Select Board. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to present this to the Finance Committee. As I mentioned to the Select Board, when I became chief, as a police officer throughout my career, we've recognized that there's issues with mental health, right? Mental health crisis. There's issues with opioid abuse. There's issues with drug use, overdoses. One of the plans that we had thought about, and that we as a department decided that we were looking at co-response models for our police department. As I said during that meeting, police officers are tasked with responding to mental health crisis on a regular basis. We're not experts in that field. We're trained to do certain things. There's clinicians out there that can better handle these situations. So our decision was to start working towards a co-response model. And we're just about there. And what we're looking for is a funding source through the Opioid Relief Fund to start this program, to get it off the ground. Part of the program is called the Co-Response Jail Diversion Program. It's in a partnership with Lancaster Police Department and Open Sky Communities. Next slide, please. The partnership itself, it embeds a mental health clinician that has provided to us from Open Sky. It embeds them with a patrol officer to respond to crisis situations, that somebody's involved in a mental health crisis, as well as with possibly an overdose crisis, right? Somebody dealing with substance use disorders that we can help them with. We can provide some help for them. Provide on-scene assistance with individuals experiencing a mental health crisis, divert nonviolent, low-level offenders experience a mental health crisis or substance use disorder away from the criminal justice system. Follow-up services for mental health and substance abuse disorders. So during that presentation I gave to the Select Board too was mentioned a percentage of our incarcerated individuals throughout the United States had some type of mental health issue or some type of substance abuse disorder. The idea behind this, too, is to divert those people away from the criminal justice system, provide them the assistance they need, make them productive members, or help them, assist them to be productive members of society. And that's what we're looking to do. Next slide, please. This slide itself, this is just a quick statistical information that was gathered by SAMHSA in 2021. 13.5% of adults 18 to 25 had both substance use disorders and a mental health illness in the past year, and that goes back to 2021. I'm sure when they come out with the new study in 2022 and 2023, it's going to be even higher. Nearly 1 in 3 adults had either substance use disorder or mental health illness. 40% 46% of young adults had either substance use disorder or a mental health illness. That's a high number, and think about what police officers are tasked with and to deal with. Percentage of adults who meet the criteria for co-occurring disorders is higher among multiracial populations. Urban settings, we're starting to see, an increase in that. And to go along with that stat, if you look at it, it goes across every culture, right? Mental health and substance use disorders across every culture, and it impacts every community. Next slide, please. This slide is just some informational statistics for the town of Lunenburg and for our area. MHE is mental health evaluation calls. In 2022, we responded to 36. MHEDA is mental health evaluation, drug and alcohol offenses. That's 4. ODNF is overdose non-fatals, which was 5 that year, and ODF is overdose fatals. 1. Section 12 is when we have to respond to a call and we have to commit somebody to the hospital under a mental health evaluation. Officers are often tasked to do that, and again, we can only be trained so much, we can only make so many good decisions in that arena. That year that we had 29. The 2020 statistical information that you see right now, that's based through the end of September. And I will say this, those numbers, are low. When I presented to the select board that Tuesday, we had 9 calls over the weekend that involved some type of mental health crisis. Of those, we had alcohol involvement, we had drug involvement. I went back and looked in the logs again today, and in the last 2 days, we had an attempted suicide, and then we had a drug overdose, possibly a drug overdose. That was a person that was sent to the hospital. So we are seeing an uptick, so those low numbers could be deceiving. Part of those numbers too, I feel, and I could probably tell you this with confidence, is it's underreported. People don't automatically call the police when these situations arise. When we do get those calls, they're in crisis. They're at the end of the rope, right? And that's when we have to respond. The other part of it is that some people treat this as a family type of issue. They deal with it on their own, whether it's issuing or giving somebody Narcan or dealing with the mental health crisis on their own and try to seek help on themselves, and we don't necessarily get that information. So I believe those numbers could be higher. Next slide, please. So to talk about what the program is, it's a co-response program. It's a foundation of a CI team response. CIT is a critical intervention team, and that's what we're trying to get to. So with a critical intervention team, our officers are trained on how to deal with crisis, people that are in some type of crisis mode. With that, you partner them with a clinician that is, who's an expertise or who's an expert in that field. They ride with the patrol officer, right, and respond to those calls. Given the numbers that you've seen, and as I explained during that select board hearing, we don't have the numbers that call for somebody to be here 40 hours a week. So that was the idea behind partnering with Lancaster too, that we could evenly split the 20 hours between the two towns. On top of that, if we needed somebody and the clinician was in Lancaster, we would be able to bring that clinician over under an MOU. They would come over and respond, vice versa, if they were available. The clinician in the co-response also provides assistance with individuals in mental health crisis afterwards, follow-up, right, follow-up care. Because they're not always going to be with us. We may have situations over the weekend or when they're not on that they're going to have to follow up with and provide services. Substance use disorder guidance and follow-up. They have multiple resources that we don't necessarily have, and they would be able to guide these people and assist these people to get to the assistance they need. Notification of mass casualty and trauma events, traumatic events, and provide assistance for people that are suffering from these type of events. It would be, God forbid that we ever have to deal with something like that, but we would have a clinician on board to start the process and to start the healing process with us. Notifications. When we talk about notifications, oftentimes our officers are called to make notifications to a family member that somebody has passed, whether it's from drug overdoses, suicide, or whatever. Those are tough conversations. Those are hard conversations with somebody in uniform. We like to take it as a soft approach, but no matter what, we're still in uniform. We bring a clinician with us. It helps ease that tension. We can get people help that they need when they start suffering. Next slide, please. So with that being said, again, I'll reiterate, it's 20 hours a week that we will be splitting with the town of Lancaster. It would be under an MOU and a mutual aid agreement with the town. We would respond to critical incidences in either town as long as that person is not being dedicated to a call in that community, provide outreach services, and provide referral services. One of the things that a question came up the other day at the Select Board's meeting about Lancaster's commitment. I've spoken to the chief, and they've already committed the funds, and they'll be providing a letter on behalf of the town manager and himself that the funds will be committed, and we can move forward with the program. The next slide. This is the associated costs that we're looking at for this. For the first year of the funding is $79,032. This would provide a clinician, training, IT equipment, and mileage for that clinician, and some indirect costs. As you see it, it's broken down. Again, this would be split between the town of Lancaster and the town of Lunenburg. The reason why we're asking for the full amount of the funding is a community has to be the host community. So it was decided that Lunenburg would be the host community, that we would move forward with this, and we would be reimbursed by Lancaster. Currently, Officer McNamara is filing a grant for $200,000 through Department of Mental Health. He anticipates completing that grant process next week and filing. And I said this during that conversation with the Select Board, is if we get that grant, I'll return the money to the Opioid Relief Fund. This is a funding source to start us and to continue us. And I will say this, that if the grant comes through, they are rolling grants and we'll continue to apply for them. I made it perfectly clear that this isn't a one-time event for us, that I want to make sure that we fight for every penny that we can get to continue to fund this program. This is important. It's important to our community. It's important to communities around our area too. Another added benefit, which I did mention also, is having a clinician on board gives my officers the ability to speak to people, to speak to a clinician. Every one of you have seen what's going on around in this country. You've seen the news. You see what my officers have to deal with. You see what police officers have to deal with around this country. Suicide rates amongst officers are high, extremely high. We deal with a lot and a lot of pressure on them. This provides them an opportunity to talk to people, to talk to a clinician. I care deeply about my department. I care deeply about the people that work for us. And it provides them an opportunity to be well. And that's another added benefit. That's what I have for now. I'll open it up to any questions. I hope you all watched the presentation I had last week, and you should give me applause. No. And I kept it under a half hour, then Michael Ray and Chairman Jeffries. So.
Open up to the committee. Any questions?
I just had one quick one, just on process. This clinician, that's a person, or is it a group of people that Open Sky has, or is it?
One person. We would hire
person.
one clinician through Open Sky.
Would they hire the person?
Yes. They would be actually an employee of Open Sky, and they'd be contracted to us.
Okay. Because they have the expertise.
Correct. Another, a good thing about having a Open Sky working with us in partnership, they also have psychiatrists on staff. Easily make a phone call and we can start working with them also.
All right, I have a question. Surprise, right?
Not shocked.
Yeah. So this person would work 20 hours for us, 20 for Lancaster. Would they be on like Monday through Friday first shift, or what would be like the?
The ideal shift would be from 11 11 in the morning or 12 in the afternoon to 7 or 8 at night. Working ideally 4 and 2. We know that may not be possible with clinical work. It may be, maybe something like Tuesday through Saturday or Sunday through Thursday.
And then ideally, would you, if this pilot becomes kind of successful, would you ideally be looking towards having 24/7 coverage in town, 24/7 coverage across the towns?
No.
Something less than that?
It doesn't call for that. 24/7, I don't think the numbers or the statistical information we have would support it at this point. If we started seeing something that developed and that came to say, yeah, you need 24/7, then we would work on a different plan.
Okay, and then, do you know if Lancaster applied for that same $200,000 grant?
We're applying for the grant as a joint.
As the host,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I have just a couple of questions.
Sure.
Do we have any currently CIT trained officers?
We do.
We do?
We have 4.
We have 4,
including
okay.
myself.
Okay.
I'm not in that number.
Are we hoping to train more?
I do. I have 3 more scheduled.
Okay, and we have,
Yeah, the idea is not to have the entire department CIT trained, but to have a team. So you have a team to respond.
okay. And I assume the training is coming out of training budget and all that, so it's not,
Yes, the overtime is, but the training is free.
okay. Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Then the big one that I have is, do we have any assurances with Lancaster for future years? What happens?
That's for the grant. That's why we're applying for the grant jointly. And the funding, one of their concerns too was the future of the funding. And we said we will continue to get this grant through DMH. Another question that came up was that about the grant funding and, how does this continue the funding? And again, I will fight tooth and nail to continue to fight for these grants. DMH, and again, it's not a guarantee, but DMH wants to see these type of programs. There is grants through the feds and through the state that readily give money for co-response type of programs. So we'll keep going.
Excellent. Okay. Any other questions from the committee?
One other,
Go right ahead. Go ahead.
one other point I just wanted to make, because I know this question came up, and I know the thought was that this is not a appropriate use of opioid relief funds. If you look through the state of Massachusetts and what is allotted or what is allowed through this abatement fund, this is exactly what it's intended for. Halfway through the document, you can see that they support co-responses within municipalities, especially when you're dealing with co-occurring type of issues. When somebody is dealing with a mental health issue, also dealing with, a substance use disorder. So those are readily, that's what the funds are allocated for too.
Speaking of the funds, have we heard anything more about additional funds coming in from that? from the
I would have to
settlements?
defer that to the town manager who is listening to this for the second time.
Got it.
She would have more information on that about how much more money we get.
Okay.
There's several pharmaceutical companies that had to pony up.
Okay.
I don't have those numbers tonight, where the balance of that account right now is around 99,000.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dave Passios, again, 56 Whiting Street. Chief, things run together for me over the past decade or so, but I think we had a conversation about this type of a program a couple of budget seasons ago, where I had seen an article where there was a pilot program that was just kicking off in another town. I believe it was in Massachusetts. For some reason, I have Winchester in my head, but I don't think that's right. But anyway, we had a conversation within the past 2 or 3 years. And during that conversation, it was one of those things that the chief was aware of, didn't feel the town was quite ready for it, wanted to see how the pilot programs worked out. And here we are today. I fully support this moving forward. Thank you. Thank you.
I will say that the program is being incorporated statewide. Over in Groton, I believe Dunstable and Pepperell are using COIN, which is another group like Open Sky, and providing the same thing, co-response for those 3 communities. So it's not unheard of in our area. Leominster already has a program going. There's other communities that are looking in that same direction.
Actually, I have a clarification question for the town manager. On the presentation, it's listing the total at $79,032, and on the draft that we have, it's listed at $80,000. Is there a plan to amend, or are we going for 80?
I'll answer that. I requested $80,000 because at the time I didn't get a breakdown from Open Sky yet. I would suggest that we keep it at 80. $52 on the side there. I would suggest that we just keep it at the 80 at this point.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comment from the public?
Told you I'd keep it short.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the questions and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right. On to our 7:40. We're almost catching up. The school department and the school committee. So this one, I didn't read the last one, but this is for current letter F. And it reads, to see if the town will vote to transfer $232,800 from the fiscal year 23 capital plan as voted under Article 6 of the May 7th, 2022 annual town meeting to the Lunenburg School District for the purpose of installing ductless split climate control systems at the Lunenburg Primary School or take any other action relative thereto. And I would happily invite the school department, school committee. You guys are all over the place, and we have a presentation as well. I'll pull up.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Burnham, Superintendent of Schools, and with me is the School Committee Chair, Mrs. Archambault. I'm going to be as brief as I can moving through this information. You've already read the warrant article. I think for the benefit of the community that may be watching, it's important to provide a little bit of background on this particular project. The primary school AC project has been included in the school committee's approved capital plan since FY21. However, the project has not been included in the town's capital plans, as each year it had not been deemed a high enough priority by the capital planning committee. After the project was not included in the initial capital planning committee recommended FY23 capital plan, the Lunenburg School Committee wrote a letter to the town manager and the select board requesting that the priority assigned to the project be increased. Ultimately, the project was included in the FY23 capital plan presented at the annual town meeting and approved in that amount of $232,800. This project has been through a few iterations along the way. The first proposed plan came through DiGiorgio Associates, who provided the specs and a cost estimate. The plan, the rooftop condensers would be installed and the existing rooftop air handling units would be utilized. However, DiGiorgio felt that there was an upgrade to the electrical service that would be required. Our then Director of Facilities and Grounds, Mr. John Londa, disputed the need for the upgrade to the electrical service to support the new mechanicals and therefore deducted that electrical cost estimate, which resulted in the request that came forward in the amount of $232,800. At the annual town meeting, prior to the vote on the FY23 capital plan, I was questioned about the need for the electrical work and whether I was certain that it was not necessary. I committed to consulting an engineer to make a determination regarding the electrical question, as our Director of Facilities and Grounds had retired and was not present to provide the evidence or the rationale for his assessment that it was not needed. We then contracted engineers to do a peer review of the proposed specs and cost estimate from DeGiorgio. We asked them to make a determination on the electrical question. However, that peer review resulted in a recommendation for some additional review. We then contracted another engineering company and asked them to do an assessment. Their subsequent assessment and project pricing for a complete air conditioning upgrade replacement, their recommendation came through that the existing air handling units were 20 years old and would be approaching end of life. And then they felt that the best way forward, their recommendation was to replace the air handling units, add the condensers, and they sent that proposal with their specs out for cost estimate. And that cost estimate came in at $7.9 million, obviously outside of the realm of possibility. Therefore, we started to look at alternate solutions, and we determined that the best alternative plan would be to install ductless split systems for the classrooms. These systems would consist of one 48,000 BTU dual zone condenser with heat pump and two 24,000 BTU wall or ceiling mounted heads for distribution. Each system would provide coverage for 2 classrooms. In the building currently, there are 7 rooms on the 2nd floor and 8 other spaces on the 1st floor that are air conditioned by a permanently installed AC unit, a mini split, as opposed to removable window AC units. We would be looking to provide air conditioning and supplemental heat in the remaining classrooms in the building and 2 additional office spaces. Looking at the project pricing, in order to air condition the entire building, we would have to approach this in 2 phases. The first phase, utilizing the already allocated $232,800. With that money, it's estimated that we would be able to provide cooling and supplemental heating in 16 classrooms. That would include all 13 classrooms on the 2nd floor, as well as 3 classrooms on the 1st floor. Last fall, we sought to revise a special town meeting warrant article to allow approval of this modified AC project that I've just outlined. However, when I went before the select board requesting to revise the warrant article that we had submitted, the select board did not approve that request. So late last spring, we sought approval for the modified project outlined from the select board and the finance committee at the recommendation of the town manager. The select board at that time granted their approval to move forward with this modified plan. However, this body did not. So no progress has been made on this project. Phase 2, just as a point of information, we've incorporated the funding for that into our FY25 capital plan. That cost would cover the additional units for the remaining classrooms on the 1st floor and those 2 additional office spaces on the 2nd floor. And if you look at our plan that will be presented in the coming weeks, we've allocated $160,000 for phase 2. We feel that the project intent remains the same as when we originally presented this for approval some years ago. We would be attempting to manage classroom air comfort. However, the execution and the mechanicals are different than what was originally presented at the annual town meeting back in May of '22 when the monies were approved. So as these monies were approved by town meeting, and since the scope of the project has been modified to fit within the already allocated monies, we would be looking to take this back to the town meeting for a vote to see if they would support the modified approach to providing air conditioning in the school with the monies that have already been previously allocated. It's important to note that this is the kind of project that must be done when school is not in session. Therefore, if this project were approved at special town meeting, we would not be able to execute on this project until the summer of 2024. So that's the journey that we've been on relative to attempting to climate control our primary school. And now I can take questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee first?
I have a couple. All right. So is there a phase 3, or is it just going to stop at classrooms?
Phase 2 includes the remainder of the classrooms and 2 office spaces.
Not my question. So is there a
There's not a
follow-on
third.
phases for cafeterias, libraries,
There's no plan
gyms?
for that at this time, although I reserve the right to revisit that. We have a new facility director coming on board in a week's time. We will also see what happens with this article at special town meeting. Because quite frankly, if it fails again, I will be going back to the drawing board and we will be putting our multi-million-dollar project on our capital plan.
All right, and then I have a pretty good understanding of these units. Can you describe kind of like what the exterior of the building's going to look like after this? I mean, it's like
Yep.
25 classrooms of,
Yep, we know that the front facade of the building, we don't want to have units hanging all over the exterior of the front facade of the building. Several of the units will be rooftop. Several of the units will be on the back courtyard side of the building. And those that would have to be on the front-facing facade of the building would be located down low, and the ductwork up would be camouflaged.
it would be, how would it be camouflaged?
Oh, I would imagine that we would attempt to color it in a color that blends with the brick facade.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions.
I guess the only questions that I really have are, after phase 2, what will still be left unconditioned at that point in the building?
The large spaces, which would be the cafeteria and the gymnasium.
Okay. That would be it, though. All the specials rooms would be covered at that point, and, okay.
In the library, right?
The library
Library
already
is.
has a unit
It's freezing in
up
there.
and down. Because it has rather large windows that take the sun all day.
My other question would be, if this is approved, have we had any contact with the original company that gave you the quote to see if the pricing is still anywhere near this, or if they're able to still do this? I know it's early, but for the summer of 2024, it's going to be here before we know it.
We have not reached out yet again to the same vendor, because I will be honest, the fact that this project has been in limbo for quite some time, I'll be honest, the vendor is rather frustrated with this experience thus far. So we have not yet gone back. Obviously, if the prices have increased, we would have less capability to cover as many classrooms as we're planning right now. We would do as many as we possibly could and then incorporate the rest into a later phase.
And I think the last question I have would be, given that I just went through this process myself at my house, are there any incentive programs for schools for rebates or anything from the federal government or from the state or anything like that you're aware
Green
of?
communities,
Right.
grants.
Since it is considered an extremely clean form of heating and cooling.
We have not approached green communities for funding for this. However, I have initiated some conversation with the committee regarding replacement of the Turkey Hill windows. They are not energy efficient. They are single pane glass, which compounds the challenges we have with heating and cooling the building to a comfortable temperature that we can maintain. We had challenges this past February with the cold snap. I spent many hours and many days in the building monitoring the temperature conditions in all of the classrooms. I did the same at Turkey Hill and the primary in the early weeks of school this year, because we did have a warm spell that lasted for several days. We have discussed the possibility of moving toward mini split units at Turkey Hill as well as part of our facility improvement planning for that building to maintain it as a school, potentially until 2040. The heating system is old, it's original. We had difficulties this past winter. The temperatures that second week of school in the second floor classrooms was at 90 degrees in the classrooms. Not conducive to teaching and learning, not at all. If we had the ductless mini splits in the Turkey Hill as well, it would give us a backup heating source should we have challenges with the HVAC system in the winter months, as well as some capability to cool. We had also requested what is referred to as safety film for the windows for all of our schools, but one of the benefits of that safety film is that it also reflects the solar back out, and that helps either, maintain the cool in the summer seasons that seem to be shifting into October. So we are attempting to problem solve on the energy front in all of the buildings. But that's where we're at.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee?
I guess I do have a question, maybe. Dave, are you on green communities still? Do you happen to know if there's any incentives for this kind of system for a municipal building or a school building?
Dave Passios, again, 56 Whiting Street, member of the Green Communities Committee. There is a shift in progress with the Green Communities funding. Many of you probably know up to now it's been lighting and energy efficiency in those types of installations. They are moving towards building efficiency, including envelopes and these types of systems, especially mini splits. I mean, the state, as Evan obviously knows now, the incentives are really out there. I can't speak specifically to it. We have a meeting Tuesday evening, and we will be discussing that and what the superintendent actually reached out to me about the windows at Turkey Hill, so on and so forth. Quick note I threw down about the film. As your representative to the capital planning last year, there was some pushback on that for a number of reasons. I think a lot of it had to do with areas that needed upgrading before we put film on old windows that are leaking through the frames and all that kind of stuff. That was part of my pushback on it. I think there's, as the superintendent has mentioned, you increase an R value with any coating you put on a glass, but you're not going to help yourself if you don't do it on windows that aren't secure from the outside conditions. Getting back to the primary school, this is the first time I've heard that these mini splits are going to be used for supplemental heat. You know, it's been discussed in the past that it was going to be strictly cooling. I'm not sure if I heard that wrong or what. I'm glad to hear that. But there is a way to integrate mini splits with an existing air handling system and HVAC system so that you get the most efficiency out of it. And that hasn't been explored yet. The other question I have is that in that second or third peer review, the comment about the air handling systems being 10 years old and approaching their end of life, where do they fit into the future capital improvements for the primary school? Because you're going to have to replace them at some point. So you almost need to back those out of a major multi-million-dollar project right now, because you're going to have to replace those anyway at some point in the near future. I personally would rather see us spend millions of dollars if we're going to keep the building for 20 or 30 more years. If we're looking to tear it down in 10 or 15, then put the mini splits in. They'll be at the end of their lifespan. Take the building down and build another one. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to provide some clarification. The building is approaching 20 years old, not 10, so those mechanicals are 20 years old.
The primary school you're talking about.
Yes. And the units are capable of supplying supplemental heat. It's not our intention to be running them for heating purposes at the primary school. That is a greater potential should we install them at the Turkey Hill Elementary. It serves as a backup heating should the HVAC system fail or struggle the way it did with the cold snap in February. But we do intend to be focused on the cooling and the dehumidifying components for use at the primary school.
Mr. Beardmore, I saw you had your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Thank you. Not at this point. I was looking to make the same clarification that the superintendent was making, but I reserve the right to come back maybe in a minute.
I'll see if I can find your hand. Any other public comment from the public?
I had one more thing.
Sure.
Possibly a moot point at this point in the adventure we're all on. But as part of that second peer review, I believe it was the second one anyway, those engineers stated in there more or less that if we had moved forward with the original plan to just put the condensers on the roof and tie them into the existing system, that there were areas of the building that would be severely imbalanced. We'd have refrigerators and we'd have ovens in certain areas. It didn't specify what those areas were, and maybe they were small, but there was a inference that there was a problem with the original design that would have been enhanced by adding the air conditioning. Thank you. I've been trying to stay away from air conditioning, climate control.
Ron DeLisio, 181 Reservoir Road. I just wanted to comment that I agree with Mr. Passios and comments made at the select board meeting on Tuesday night regarding my opinion on this article. and spending $232,800 was portrayed as addressing the entire building. Now it's only portions of the building. So that alone, in my mind, makes it two different proposals. And I would prefer, as Mr. Passio said, to more fully address the problem than poking holes all over the building. And I'm also not clear on whether these units just cool the classrooms, or does it flow throughout the building at all?
If the doors are open.
Okay, it just seems to me that there has to be some middle ground between what $232,800 gets us and what $7.9 million gets us. That we should be exploring some of that, maybe middle ground would be a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Director responding.
The $232,800 with the modified plan dating back to last fall was always going to partially cool the building. It was never going to supply us enough units to cool all classrooms, offices, and the general space in the building. It was always for a partial implementation.
Mr. Beardmore.
Here we go.
All right, here we go. Thank you for recognizing me again. So a lot has been said last week, this week, and over the last 2 or 3 years about this project. There have been criticisms about the circuitous route that it took, and all of the various differences of opinion amongst people that are much more educated than I am with respect to the engineering and climate control systems. I'm a marketer. I understand very little of it, but I have been involved in this committee and the school committee and the capital planning committee for a while now. And I can tell you that the process has been followed. It may not have been followed elegantly, and we certainly have run into a variety of different problems along the way, as have been discussed here tonight. But given the information that we have right now and the extraordinary costs associated with air conditioning a building of that size, and we've seen a lot of comparable information that has come from different sources that, yeah, I mean, in 2023, air conditioning a building of that size is a multi-million-dollar project. And as was pointed out by another member of this committee tonight, we have an awful lot of things pending from a capital planning perspective that we don't have the money for. So we're not going to go out and spend $2 or $3 or $6 or $7 or $8 million to air condition that building. This is the middle ground. It may not be what we thought it was 2 years ago, but on October 12th of 2023, this is the middle ground. This is the most feasible and cheapest way to get to solve the problem, which is we are trying to teach 5 and 6 and 7-year-old kids in rooms that are 90+ degrees and 99% plus humidity. and it's just not conducive to educating kids in those, in those spaces. Moreover, we cannot program that building in the summer months. We can't do it. The building basically doesn't get used in the summer months. We should be able to. You know, that's almost a third of the calendar. So I would encourage you to think of it this way. It hasn't been pretty. Frankly, it's been ugly. There are some things here that I don't think any of us can be proud of. But at the end of the day, we did approve a sum of money to deal with the problem that I've just described. And we still have the opportunity to deal with that problem, if not as elegantly as we thought we would a couple of years ago. And so I would encourage you to vote to recommend doing this, because ultimately it's the most expedient way to get us so that we're not educating 6-year-olds in 90+ degree heat with 99% humidity, and you know, also putting that additional burden on our teachers and our paraprofessionals and our staff who have to manage children under those conditions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one additional question, if you don't mind. This said the VAV International second proposed plan, total estimated cost was $7.9 million. Existing air handling units nearing end of useful life. Do you have did they break out what the replacement of the existing air handling units were as a contributing factor to that $7.9 million?
I'll have to see if I have that breakout. I don't know if I do.
I don't even care if even if you know if it's like 50% of it or 40% of it or 90% of it is what I'm going at.
I don't have that breakout, but I can get that information for you.
I would appreciate that information, I think, because again, if this is something that's going to pop onto the capital plan in the next couple of years, and it's already, $7.9 million pops up, and then we already spent on these other things, and I guess I just want to understand the long-term plan associated with it. So,
It's hard to say right now what the long-term plan is, because I've got a multi-phase plan that I can't even move phase one forward, and the longer time goes by, without approval, I'm going to come back with the entire project on the capital plan.
all right, you're not going to get far with me if you come in with one phase at a time. You're going to come far with me if you come in with, here's the overall plan in the 5 phases, and here's the entirety of it. I want to see the holistic view. I want to know the incremental funding associated with it.
Right. So you've got phase one and phase two. We'd have to see what it would cost us to put in units for the gym and the cafeteria. They're bigger spaces than the classrooms, so they would require different size units for those 2 spaces. Beyond that, if all of that is installed, then in the capital plan, you're just talking about bringing in the expense of replacing the existing air handling units. It would not be the $7.9 million project. It would be to replace the aging mechanicals that are already there, not adding additional mechanicals at that time. So that's what I see. If phase one can get off the ground, then phase two, we would look at a potential phase 3, air conditioning those larger spaces, and then we'd be looking to incorporate replacement of the roof air handling units, not doing the full $7.9 million project. because it wouldn't be needed at that point.
The sizing of the units per classroom, was that done by an HVAC specialist, or was that done by the?
We've had the folks in from Dakin to take a look at that and make recommendations.
They're the ones that recommended the 24,000? Okay. That's all I got.
Any other public comment from the public? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Right on time for our 7:55 appointment at 8:55.
I should have looked at the TV or something before I left, because I would have waited. Karen Menard, 672 Page Street. I'm actually just the clerk of the Parks Commission now, after way too many years as chair. So Anna Lockwood was not able to attend, so you have me. I think the easiest way to sort of go over this and have it make sense to everybody is to sort of give a quick timeline of how we got to where we are with this warrant article. This piece of property was purchased by the town actually back in 1913. We have a deed restriction on it that says we can only use this for parks and a playground. So a year ago, actually a few years ago, we started a planning process, the master planning process for Marshall Park. And a year ago, the Parks Commission went in front of special town meeting last November, looking for $184,000 to move us into our next phase of planning and getting everything going. We did that. That also allowed us to apply for a very large grant. It's a $500,000 grant. We submitted that application the beginning of the summer, and at the same time, the select board had come forward and had agreed to, with ARPA funds, give $1 million in ARPA funds to the master planning of Marshall Park and moving forward into the next phase of that. Our grant application, from what we understand, was very well received. It was very thorough. We spent a tremendous amount of time on this. But they've come back to us. They're looking for votes. And they're looking for votes of very specific votes. And that's because they want to make sure that they have all their T's crossed and their I's dotted, which is fine. It appears to me that the ARPA funding is relatively new to them. That's not something that typically goes in front of town meeting, because it's a select board that gets to make that decision. So this warrant article has been very confusing to some people as to why it's there. But here we are. We're in a position where it's $500,000. We don't want to do anything that would jeopardize us being able to get $500,000 in grants, because if we don't get it from the grants, we would likely have to turn back to the town for that piece of it. So we're trying to not have that piece of the pie come from town. We're looking to have it come from grants. So this article, and I'll read it, because there's actually there's 3 different sections to it. To see if the town will vote to reauthorize raising and appropriating of the sum of $184,000 for final engineering and design services for certain recreation and open space areas at the property known as Marshall Park, located at 100 Chestnut Street, as previously voted under Article 4 of the November 15th, 2022 special town meeting, with an additional sum of $1 million being heretofore committed by the Select Board from American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds for associated improvements to said Marshall Park, specifically including the construction of a playground, multi-sport courts, and pavilion for a total amount of $1,184,000 committed to the aforesaid project, representing 100% of the total cost thereof. So to break that down, we've already voted on $184,000. The town's already committed that to us at the special town meeting. The select board has already committed $1 million. The grant folks at the state are asking us to re-vote on that and to throw in support for the $1 million in ARPA funds. What this would not do is if this, for some reason, if the town decided to vote no on this, it doesn't take away the $1 million in ARPA funds to the Parks Commission for Marshall Park, and it doesn't rescind the $184,000 that special town meeting already supported us for last year. So this is truly just trying to cross every T and dot every I to move forward with this grant application. The decision will hopefully come out, I think sometime in November. It's 120 days since when it closed, and I think our chair said it was the end of November. So there's that piece. And then the next piece, as I said, 1913 is when this piece of property was deeded to the town, and there is a deed restriction on that, but the state is asking us to actually vote on it. I don't know if there's a vote from 1913. It's nothing that we've ever found, so we're basically, again, redoing a vote, or putting it into Chapter 45. So this is to dedicate the aforementioned property to active recreation purposes pursuant to General Law, Chapter 45, Section 3, consistent with said property's present restrictions to park and playground purposes forever per the deed to the town dated March 18th, 1913, and recorded with the Worcester Northern District Registry of Deeds. I'll spare you all the details of page and book. To authorize the Park Commission, so that's part two. So that part two would be to a vote to put it into Chapter 45, Section 3. And then the third section is to authorize the Parks Commission and or the Select Board on behalf of the town to apply for and accept any and all grants deemed necessary under the Urban Self Act. All I can say on this entire article is that when this information was found out, the chair of Parks Commission went back to town manager and also worked with Adam Costa, the town attorney. And Adam Costa then went back to the state and they had their discussions, and this is the language that's come out of those discussions. Could we complain about it and say it's confusing and say, why are we doing this? Absolutely, but this is $500,000. It's $500,000 if awarded through this grant, doesn't have to come out of the town, directly out of the town's pocket. It comes out from taxpayers somewhere, but it's not directly out of our budget. So that's where we are. I don't think it's going to have a financial impact per se, because it's already been decided. But yeah, that's where we are. Mr. Menard, do you have a question? I'm sure there's got to be something from you.
Do you have to recuse yourself from
I
questions?
think I've heard a lot about this one, so.
You have nothing, really?
No, I mean, my opinion is there is a financial impact on this in as much as we would potentially open an avenue towards $500,000 on the funding side of things. So I think there's no reason not to support this, as confusing and, as it is, but having dealt with, governments before, they follow processes and they audit things and they get wrapped around the axle, and if this helps to unstick it, then it seems to make sense to do.
Any other questions from the committee? I was going to share the same sentiment that I actually do see a financial impact on this one. If it's not.
The second half of it, yes, but there's no, if the vote is a no, then there's absolutely a financial impact on it, because it would, and we are going to continue to apply. We have some other grants in the pipeline that we're going to apply for. So this is just a big piece of it that we don't want to lose. And again, the state came out, they said that our application was excellent and very thorough, and based on the amount of time that we put into it, I have to agree. It was probably one of the most stressful processes I've gone through in terms of anything town related. So if we can, not lose all the work that we put into it as well, that'd be great. No guarantee that we're going to get it, of course, but I can't imagine they would be asking us to do all of this if we weren't somewhere in contention for something. So thank you.
Public comment from the public. Mr. Passios.
Glad I came tonight, been to the podium more tonight than the last 6 months.
There's an open chair up here if you want, just saying.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street, former member of the Parks Commission. Speaking right now as a citizen. I want to congratulate the commission in this process. I was on the board at the very beginning of the application process and bailed before I got too buried into it. But they've done a fantastic job of moving this forward. And when have you not heard of requiring redundancy when you apply for anything when it has to do with grants, federal government, local government, state government. Some of it is redundancy, but as someone said on the board here this evening, if that's what they want to give us $500,000, we need to do it. And cleaning up the ownership of the property through the proper channels with Mass General Law and so on is a long overdue move. So doing that all in one article instead of, say, 3 separate articles, I applaud them in doing it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment?
Anyone else before I go?
Peter's not on anymore, so you're good. Thank you. All right, so that moves us to the end of our meetings, and we're on to just the regular old moneyed articles.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Before you close the public hearing, could I bring back a comment to
Oh, I'm not closing the public hearing.
Okay.
Not until after we get through all of the moneyed articles.
Okay. When you had Mr. Jeffers up there, you jumped off of I before I had a chance to comment.
Oh, would you mind? Sure, come on up.
Oh.
Again, Dave Passios. Speaking as a former representative from this committee on the capital planning for, I think, a couple of budget seasons at least, my frustration with the process that went on with the capital plan that we're dealing with here at special town meeting was that the first 2 items that were definitely very high priorities chewed up most of the money available for capital projects. So initially, I hadn't thought of the fact that when I heard that they may come out of special purpose stabilization, that, oh, great, we can move further down the list. Well, that's not true because those funds, it didn't put funds back into availability for capital planning. So here we are looking to do what was originally planned, and that is take it out of the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund. One quick step back. During our deliberations, there was discussion that there was a good chance ARPA would step into those 2 big ticket items for the reasons stated earlier in this hearing. And we were on board with that, but I was really disappointed that no matter which way we went, it didn't bring us further down the list on the capital projects. There are a lot of important things that aren't going to have or aren't happening this year that are first steps in 3-step projects. So I was disappointed in that respect. On the other side of the coin, I feel that the money should stay in the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund because 2 or 3 years from now, if we don't have free cash to fund the next fire truck or whatever the big expense thing is, that money will already be gone out of that account. If we keep it in there, we'll have money to pay, basically, we could say pay cash for a fire truck. We did that with the ladder truck, and everybody was all excited, oh, we can pay cash for the fire truck. But the only way we did that was because we had a substantial amount of free cash. We've always been warning that free cash isn't forever, and I think we're going to see it tighten up a lot over the next 5 years. So my vote will be to keep it in that account and use the ARPA funds. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so my plan for these ones is just to run down through them, reference any updates from the town manager, having a chance for public comment, and then move to the next one. After that, we will close the public hearing and then deliberate and vote on recommendations. So starting off with letter A, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds all sums of money necessary to amend the amounts voted for the town's FY 2024 budget under Article 7 of the May 6th, 2023 town meeting, or take any other action relative thereto. Do we have a number?
We do not have a definitive number, but I have somewhat of an update. from the last meeting last week. I did hear back from DOR, from 2 different people within DOR, and the response was that we would be able to raise funding at the town meeting. They advised that we go through the process of plugging in the figures into our, what they call the pro forma tax form through Gateway, which is the system that we submit our submittals to get our tax rate set and valuations, etc. So the available funding, and I'm going to clarify that it's not excess levy capacity, it's more of a we have surplus funds due to the change in state aid number from what our original estimates are. So that number is approximately 129,000. 120 of that being the surplus funds, and we had about 9,000 from excess levy capacity that we left as excess at the town meeting in the spring. Additionally, they did say we could change our estimate for new growth, which I do based on what the assessor's office is submitting or working on right now for new growth figures. It will exceed what our original estimate was at the spring town meeting as well. So they have some additional properties that they're still working on getting those into the system, and so I need those final figures before I have a more accurate number to use for our estimated new growth, but it would still be a conservative figure. So in your means, what I want to see us, when we're ready to set the tax rate in spring, have to have a deficit to cover an overestimated amount for new growth.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Well, any comments from the public? All right, flying through. Letter B. To see if the town will raise and appropriate, will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money for payment of prior year's expenses or take any other action relative thereto.
There are no known prior year expenses at this time.
Excellent. Any comment from the committee?
That's good.
Any comment from the public? All right, moving on to letter C. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money to fund the first year of the FY24, FY25, and FY26 Lunenburg Municipal Employees Collective Bargaining Agreement dated July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2026 with AFSCME Council 93 or take any other action relative thereto.
There's no change from last week on this one. We're still in negotiations.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the committee? Any questions or comments from the public? All right. Madam Town Manager, do you have a preference? Would you like to speak to any of the articles that we went through and had presentations on earlier? I don't mind reading them, but since we've already gone through public comment, I at least want to give you an opportunity.
I'm in favor of using the opioid settlement stabilization fund for this purpose. It is a eligible use of those funds, and I think it's a much needed program and would be a benefit to the community.
Thank you.
And E, I am also in favor of this project, of transferring those funds for that purpose. I know there's a lot of discussion on this about, is this the right way to cool that building? I think there is, again, a need for it to happen. It's gone through a number of iterations, as the superintendent said, and I think pulling it from the capital plan and identifying what the actual scope of work is makes it clear to voters as well.
Thank you. All right, moving on to F. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of money for repairs to the TC Passios building roof located at 1025 Massachusetts Avenue, or take any other action relative thereto.
I spoke to this one previously. Obviously, I put this forward, so in favor of this article and making those repairs to that section of roof at the TCP.
And are we going with that value that was in on the PDF that you would send out, the 291 and change thousand?
Round it to the 300.
300, okay.
Can you talk about that value again? I think you may have last time. You got an estimate on that?
Yes, the facilities director did, and this is a company that's well versed in large municipal projects, a roofing company, and would possibly bid on the project as well, and includes prevailing wage rates as well.
So outside of the roofing and the prevailing wage, are there additional, things that need to come off the roof and that drove it to that $30 or $35 a square foot?
I can't answer that. I can ask the facilities director if they're, but I think that was basically the cost of removal and replacement.
Because I did look at like prevailing wage, and I asked some folks that are in the industry on this and what they pay, for these kinds of services. And the numbers that they were quoting were like $14 and $15 per square foot. And this is over 30. So it seemed to them to be fairly excessive.
Well, prevailing wage can be excessive to any project.
I did ask like what they paid for roofers, and it was actually higher than prevailing wage. So that was just kind of perhaps it just comes in that in the end it comes in under 300,000, but 300 does seem high.
I think through the facilities director, I think he was a solid number. He was very comfortable with it. He sought one other quote from another company and followed up a couple times and did not get one back.
Okay.
But he was comfortable with this figure.
This will be going out to public bid.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Questions or comments from the public? All right, seeing none, on to letter G. To see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds $1,851.30 into the Sewer Reserve Capacity Stabilization Fund, or take any other action relative thereto. Anything that you'd like to add on that one, Madam Town Manager?
Those G and H are the annual articles from the Sewer Commission for amending their budget with retained earnings.
Any questions or comments on G? Anything from the public? All right, just to have it read. For letter H, to see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds $5,340 into the Sewer Infiltration Stabilization Fund, or take any other action relative thereto. Any conversation from the committee? Any from the public? Excellent. For now, I'm going to skip over letter I until we actually get out of, actually, I'll give one more chance if there's any more public comment on I. Okay. For letter J, I do not see it as a moneyed article. I'm happy to read it if anyone sees it otherwise, but it's just a report. I don't think so. Letter K is the Parks Commission request. Again, I'll give that one more opportunity for comment from the committee and from the public. All right. And as far as I read through them, that brings us to the end of the moneyed articles. From here on out, it's maybe cursorily monetary. So with that, give one more opportunity for general comment from the committee before we close out. One more chance for the public. All right, with that, I will accept a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, at 9:21, we are closed to the public hearing. So now, let us quickly get through reading down through and recommendations. So just to review, we have the ability to do a number of different options, and I will accept the following motions. We can move to find no direct financial impact and vote in favor of that. What I would say that there is not a financial impact regarding that article. We can vote to recommend approval. We can vote to recommend not approving. And we can vote to recommend that we push off until town meeting. We defer. So I will read through the articles and I will accept any of the motions that anyone would like to make. We can then discuss them, we can vote on them, and we'll record them and move forward from there. So starting with letter A, we'll read it again, just so we have it. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds all sums of money necessary to amend the amounts voted on for the town's FY24 budget under Article 7 of the May 6th, 2023 town meeting, or take any other action relative thereto.
I make a motion that we recommend approval of Article A.
Without a number?
That we,
She had a
Well,
general
we
number,
haven't
but not an
estimate.
exact number yet.
I would say regardless of the number, I would.
There's a motion first. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. You want to do it without a fixed number?
I think on this one, I'm okay with it.
It's general consensus? Okay. So there's a motion made and seconded to recommend approval. So a vote for negative on this would be to not recommend approving. It is not a vote to recommend disapproval. I just want to make that clear. Those in favor of recommending approval of Article A?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? All right. We are 4-1. Article B, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money for payment of prior year's expenses or take any other action relative thereto.
I recommend deferring our recommendation on item B.
Motion has been made and seconded to defer to town meeting, special town meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? We are unanimous, 5-0. Article C, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money to fund the first year of the FY24, FY25, and FY26 Lunenburg Municipal Employees Collective Bargaining Agreement dated July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2026, with AFS CME Council 93, or take any other action relative thereto.
Before, I had just one quick question. What if they don't come to an agreement before our meeting? Do we just
Did pass over.
They'll pass over it.
pass over it, and then, let's say, the next day they approve it, we have to go another special town meeting to approve that, or
No.
we just wait till
It'll
the
go
May
until town meeting.
Goes to town meeting.
Go to the next town meeting.
It behooves them to negotiate quickly.
Yeah.
I'd make a motion that we recommend deferring Article C.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded to recommend deferring to special town meeting. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of deferring?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? You're unanimous for recommending deferring. Warrant Article D, to see if the town will vote to transfer $80,000 from the opioid settlement stabilization fund to be used to fund the police department's mental health co-response program, or take any other action relative thereto.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article D.
There a second? Motion's been made and seconded to approve, or recommend approval. Is there any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? We are unanimous to recommend approval. Article E, to see if the town will vote to transfer $232,800 from the fiscal year 23 capital plan as voted under Article 6 of the May 7th, 2022 annual town meeting to the Lunenburg School District for the purpose of installing ductless split climate control systems at the Lunenburg Primary School, or take any other action relative thereto.
Can we have a discussion before?
Sure.
Motion.
Yeah, so just, I'm gonna.
Before we choose which type of a motion, I think.
Yeah, so just one thing I'd like to say on this one is, I would like to see whether there are incentives or not available. So I'd like to kind of get an action out there prior to town meeting before I would make a recommendation as to whether there are incentives that could bring the overall cost down and potentially even pull Phase 2 into Phase 1. I will say, just as by way of comment, I really want to see the total plan relative to climate control of this building, Turkey Hill, as well as some of the end-of-life, or soon-to-be end-of-life items in the whole, air.
School district.
Yeah, for the
Whole
school.
district.
Yeah, I mean, I would. I'd like to see what we're really looking at for these kind of things. I mean, even specifically for the primary school. So again, I've kind of harped on, and I know in capital planning, we made a point of this, that it's really important for us to have a very accurate and thorough 5-year capital plan. And I think there's a lot of things that are not on it, that are probably known at this time. So I guess the big one is the incentives. I'd like to know the incentives before making a recommendation. And then just by maybe more way of a comment, the total plan as soon as possible is pretty important to me.
Okay.
But you guys are free to make other motions if you'd.
I have no problem with recommending deferral. I think getting that information, and maybe there's going to be some discussions at the town meeting that might be entertaining, informational too, so.
Is there a second to recommend, a second on the motion to recommend deferral?
I'd second that.
Is there any discussion? I would argue that while it's nice to have those incentives, and I think we should certainly look into them, I don't think it takes away from the project as a whole. And I think since the money has already been committed at this point, it's just reappropriating it to a different area. And all that that would do would be bring the overall cost down, allowing them to potentially get into phase two. So I personally don't think there's any reason to defer. But that's why I will be voting no for deferral. Any other discussion?
My concern would just be, this being an old number, the escalation cost, this number may not do as much as they want to do.
I would agree with that, too.
All right, so we have a motion's been made and seconded to recommend deferring to town meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No?
No.
And abstentions? All right, so we do not recommend deferral. Would anybody like to recommend or to make a motion, a different motion over the top of that one at this point? I would much prefer to go to town meeting with a vote in the positive of some direction, whether it's...
Well, I'm going to recommend approval, because I don't see us ever spending $7 million to do a HVAC system over there.
I'll second
And
that.
pushing that down, there'll be another 2 or 3 years down the road to figure that out.
Yeah, and the part about the long-term issues with the heating system, I don't know how old a heating system in the building can be before it needs to be completely overhauled and replaced. That would probably be, if that's another 10 years, that's probably the time you're going to want to, okay, I'm going to put $1 million or $2 million or $3 million into the heating system, air conditioning, and decide at that point. So I think this is a 10-year solution, maybe 15, for a problem that exists today. And it's not, I mean, the kids, yes, but also the teachers and the people that work in that building. It's, and I heard from those people that it wasn't very good. So I would second the motion to approve it. That's.
Well, the building's 20 years old, so within the next 10 years, they're going to have to look at the existing heating systems. Hopefully with a new facilities director, they'll have a better handle on building maintenance and HVAC and be able to provide more information.
I think that might be a good topic for the new director to come in once they've gotten their feet wet a little bit and gotten some ground underneath them to request sort of an analysis of all the schools in the town.
Well, an ongoing analysis and a plan.
Okay, so we have a second motion at this point to recommend approval of Article E. Is there, excuse me, Article E. Any other discussion? All right, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
We are recommending approval 4-1. And I will send a request off to the superintendent as well. And I'll CC Green Communities, the chair of the Green Communities, to request some incentive questions for town meeting. Moving on to Article F. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of money for repairs to the TC Passios building roof located at 1025 Massachusetts Avenue, or take any other action relative thereto.
It was 300,000.
Yep.
Are we doing 300,000 or are we doing 291,270,000?
I think the town manager said 300,000. Yep.
Madam Town Manager, are we doing the round?
300,000.
Okay. Is there a motion to be made?
I'm going to recommend approval with reservation, only because we don't know the status of the building I also think the article should reflect that it's only a section of the roof, you know, they'll probably explain at town meeting, but
It's a good point. It does make it look, it is a little bit ambiguous to say
yeah,
repairs
it should
of
be
the
more
building roof.
specific.
Is there a second to recommend approval?
Second.
Second. Discussion?
Yeah, I'm going to vote no on this because, again, I want to see a plan come before us before throwing $300,000 at a building that I don't even know if it will be there in 5 years. And I can't, again, overstate the need to like focus on buildings, capital, and operating costs, like immediately. Maybe I would change my vote between now and town meeting if I heard more about what came out of this, you know, the building design discussions with the schools and all that, but I honestly think you can vacate that area of the building and just start demolishing it, because there's no need to bus kids for extended day. There's no other town around here that does that. We can start to consolidate that building down, and if we need to, I think it's, you know, we could bring in temporary buildings, so. I'm gonna vote no, just because $300,000 is a lot of money towards a building you may just tear down.
I agree. It is a large sum of money, but I think it's at least a temporary fix. And if, you know, we're to take Mr. Jeffrey's estimate that he presented, we're looking at $1 million to temporarily home all the people in that building while we come up with a solution. And what that solution is certainly not going to cost $300,000, and it's certainly not going to cost $1 million. It buys us a little bit of time, as we are extremely indecisive in this town, it seems to be. It's not the optimal solution, but it at least gives us a solution that does keep that building functioning in that area for the time being, and buys us a little bit more time, rather than letting it go the way of 30 School Street to where we have no choice but to just demolish it. I agree, it's close, and I certainly would like to see that plan that you're asking for. I agree completely with that. But I would much rather spend $300,000 to keep that roof a little bit more dry while we come up with this decision. Any other discussion?
No, I agree with what Chris is saying as well. I don't agree with it being costing $1 million to house other people. I think there's more cost-effective means, but the fact that it's an occupied building, and because we are indecisive, it would take several years before something else happens, or even to tear it down. To go through that whole process, it would take time.
All right, motion's made and seconded to recommend approval. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
We are recommending approval 4-1. Moving on to letter G. To see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds $1,851.30 into the Sewer Reserve Capacity Stabilization Fund, or take any other action relative thereto. Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? Okay. We are unanimous. Letter H, to see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds $5,340 into the Sewer Inflow Infiltration Stabilization Fund, or take any other action relative thereto.
Make a motion to recommend approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? We are unanimous to recommend approval. There we go. Letter I. To see if the town will vote to transfer a sum of money from the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund to pay for a new ambulance to replace Rescue 1 and 2 new dump trucks to replace 2 decommissioned dump trucks or take any other action relative thereto. And the funds that we're talking about total up to $986,000.
I'll make a motion to recommend disapproval of item I.
Second.
Any discussion?
I think it's the original, I mean, if we didn't have the ARPA money, it would have come out of capital. It would have come out of the funds. So the reason that the select board decided to do this was so they could order the trucks earlier. So now that it's done, I think they're saying, well, now we want to the funds were available and they want to use the funds that are in that account. So I understand that we're going to have more needs for capital items for these kind of things in the future, but that was what the money was for. That's why we put it aside. It makes sense to do that. I don't see again, if ARPA wasn't there, it would have been done without a problem. So and now that they changed their minds, that's fine.
Yes.
Again, I don't know they do have the control over now $986,000 to do whatever they want, but they're the select board, I guess they can.
Yeah, well, what we're saying, if town agrees to approve this, is that they want select board to start giving money towards enterprise funds, Boston artists, food banks, and all sorts of other things. And that they're not going to complain down the road when we're looking for Prop 2.5 overrides and other things for necessary funds, like ladder trucks and, the $4 million that's, coming soon for what was in that stabilization fund. So the other thing that was amended with respect to that from the government is that, hey, put $10 million towards general government. So I think that's what they did. I really am not in favor of this one, as you probably know.
I tend to lean a little bit more towards Mr. Gray's opinion that we used the money that we had at the time to get as far in front of the list as we possibly could. And now we have the opportunity to reappropriate the funds and spend the money the way that we originally intended to. And yes, that does effectively put about $1 million more into the hands of 3 people to distribute. But that's not our role to decide. It's been decided for us that it is the executive's decision for how those monies are spent. I think the approach that was taken was appropriate. And I think that this vote is not to say that they won't go to the capital plan to use or to go further down the capital plan list. This is simply just to remove the money, put it back to an ARPA fund, and then have to reallocate it again at that point. So I think it's spending the money that we should be spending for these pieces anyways and giving us an opportunity to spend the money elsewhere where we could thoroughly need it.
All right, that just solidifies that I'm totally against schools getting money for stuff and for roofs. I mean, we're fiscally irresponsible if we're not using the process that the town has at its wherewithal and spending money on, I am so against this. I'm so against the whole, let's go fund artists out of Boston to teach us how to do graffiti. And, I mean, come on. This is crazy.
Where was that on the list?
That's what that $22,000 that was given to the council. They're funding some artist out of Boston that does graffiti.
Cultural Council.
Yeah.
That's the ARPA fund. So basically, your concern is the ARPA funds are not being used properly. And I think, there's a case for that, and I think these people who are doing it, the select board are elected officials, and they are going to have to go up for election again, and if people do not like what they did with that money, they have the right to vote them out. And I think that's the process. I mean, I look down the list, and there's some things I go like, yeah, I get it. I totally understand where you're coming from, but that was the process that was set up, and they're the ones with the authority. Our thing here is, these are capital items. We should be, we have the funds available, should we use them? I think that's why I would vote to approve it, but I do understand your concern about the ARPA.
Any more discussion?
Yeah, I'm not leaning towards supporting it and giving $1 million back to the select board. I think we have a lot of capital and critical infrastructure issues that'll need to be addressed.
Yeah, and, you go to the fact that this one-off was done hastily through Congress and then through Beacon Hill and give it to quickly do things during COVID. Got it. But the power of the purse comes through the legislative branch, which is us. So putting money out of the legislative branch, power of the purse, back into the executive branch, goes against the fundamentals of government. So, again, I kind of go towards the fundamentals, and, if there's something that anyone is passionate about, they can get it into the capital plans or into the operating budgets or any other kind of warrant article come the spring, and we can choose as a town whether to fund it or not, so. So that's that's where I'm on it. And I mean, I respect every member of the select board, so that's not the issue. It's just, I'd rather see the town make decisions.
Understood. All right, we have a motion to recommend disapproval of Article I. Those in favor of disapproval?
Aye.
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 And those against disapproval?
No.
Aye. Okay, so we are recommending disapproval 3-2.
I will say I do like the debate that Michael Ray and I had on this one, so.
It was
it'll be-
nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we should be doing.
I agree.
Not everything is 100% approval. But
Yeah.
I'm on another board, and that was one of the things we don't want to be, is a rubber stamp. We want to have discussion, we want to discuss things, and reasonable people will have reasonable disagreements on reasonable things. And that's why we're here. That's why it gets televised.
I do think that this will have to be a 2/3 vote, right? Because it's a stabilization fund.
And a special
Yes.
town meeting, I believe so. Is town manager still on?
She is. Madam Town Manager, are you still with us? There she is.
Yes, it does require a 2/3 vote.
Okay.
All right.
I recommend we hear the report.
Article J, to see if the town will vote to hear an interim report from the Municipal Building Design Committee or take any other action relative thereto.
I would say, I know there's no money involved in this, but I do think that we should hear this in that, because it goes towards what is one of the more important things for this town to decide. So I'm fully looking forward to hearing what this report says, and I think we should encourage others to hear it and take it into consideration. So I don't know if it needs a vote or not, but I wouldn't.
There's no financial impact.
Do you see a direct financial impact?
No, but, okay, I mean, so I guess recommend, I move that we find no direct financial impact.
Second.
Any discussion? I agree. I think regardless of what we recommend on this one, I think we should absolutely vote as a town to hear the report. It would be nice to know what's going on ahead of May. All right, so.
Well, you can, they're on YouTube, you can watch them.
Well, yeah, but
They
it's
have
the actual
meetings.
complete report in theory.
Yeah, it's nice to see a consolidated report, though, of what's been discussed at length and all that.
It will not be, it will not have it will have hard dollar figures in it. It'll have the overall general concept of what we're trying to accomplish, and hopefully, like Selectman Jeffrey said today, that, was it Monday we're meeting? The municipal building, and we'll have the discussion with others, and hopefully be able to be a lot clearer than it is even right now to me, so.
All right, motion's been made and seconded to find no direct financial impact. Any more discussion? Those in favor of finding no direct financial impact?
I
Opposed? And abstained. We are unanimous.
I recommend you not read the next one.
Oh, come on. I can't wait to get down to like J or L or whatever they are. I have to read them. Letter K. To see if the town will vote, 1, to reauthorize raising and appropriating the sum of $184,000 for final engineering and design services for certain recreation and open space areas at the property known as Marshall Park located at 100 Chestnut Street, as shown in Assessor's Map 60, Lot 18, as previously voted under Article 4 of the November 15th, 2022 Special Town Meeting warrant, with an additional sum of $1 million being heretofore committed by the Select Board from available American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds for associated improvements to said Marshall Park, specifically including the construction of a playground, multi-sport courts, and pavilion, for a total amount of $1,184,000 committed to the aforesaid project, representing 100% of the total cost thereof. 2, to dedicate the aforementioned 100 Chestnut Street property to active recreation purposes pursuant to general law, Chapter 45, Section 3, consistent with said property's present restriction to park and playground purposes forever, per the deed to the town dated March 18th, 1913, and recorded with the Worcester Northern District Regional Registry of Deeds at Book 291, page 497, and 3, to authorize the Parks Commission and/or the Select Board on behalf of the town to apply for and accept any and all grants deemed necessary under the Urban Self-Help Act 301 CMR 500 et sec. I don't even know what that one is. Some Latin phrase. Anyone know what that one actually means?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
You wanted to read it?
I know. I just wanted to actually get it all out. As reimbursement for project costs and expenses, and to enter into all agreements and execute any and all instruments as may be necessary on behalf of the town to effectuate the same, or take any other action relative thereto. Good luck to the Parks Committee.
I would make a motion that we recommend approval of Article K.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
No additional?
All those in favor of recommending approval of Article K?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstained? We are unanimous. Here we go.
You read this, I'm walking out.
Yeah, me too.
But have you actually read it yet?
I know there's no
watched it.
financial
I watched
impact.
it, Select Board, yeah, I watched Planning Board. I would recommend the remainder of the articles we vote as one group.
Ooh, a calendar, a consent calendar?
Yeah,
For no financial impact.
there's no financial impact.
Second.
All right, so there has been a motion made and seconded to find no direct financial impact to articles as listed on the October 4th draft for letter L, submitted by the Agricultural Commission, letter M, submitted by the Planning Board? I think that's Planning Board, right? Yes, by the Planning Board. Letter N, I believe it's also submitted by the Planning Board. Letter O, sure you don't want me to read this? Still going. Also submitted by the planning board. All right, so L through K.
Adam's last act of,
Do you think he did this on purpose? Is there any further discussion on Articles L, M, or L through, L through N? J, what are we on?
No, L through N.
L through N, yeah. L through N. All right. Motion's made and seconded to find no direct financial impact. Those in favor?
aye.
Aye. Opposed? And abstained? We are unanimous. Okay. So per my notes, we only have 2 deferrals, B and C. Okay.
Which ones?
B and C. The deferral for E was defeated, so we then revoted to approve.
I thought we approved B.
No, there's no known prior
Approved A.
expenses.
Deferred B because it was none,
Deferred.
maybe there will be some. Then we deferred C.
Deferred C, yep.
Okay. Madam Town Manager, if you're still awake, do you have a very short update to give?
Yeah, I'm still awake. Very short, good news. Received notification that the grant I applied for the best practices program was awarded. We did get the $25,000 towards a bridge and culvert management plan, and the financial policies and procedures, although the request was to use the Collins Center because they provided a proposal for that work. They did not have enough funding in the best practices program, but they are going to utilize DLS staff, which is Division of Local Services staff, who've already reached out to me about doing that project. So both will be well needed by the town.
Excellent.
When do you think those will be done? Like conducted and finished?
So they were pretty quick about getting the contract paperwork for the funds for the bridge and culvert project. I should receive the fully executed bid contract shortly, and then we can work on securing a vendor for a contractor for that project. And the financial policies and procedures, they said early winter. I was hoping right away. I've already started some draft materials for them based on their format that they've used for other best practices programs for financial policy and procedures updates. So I'm going to provide them everything I have, what is existing. So hopefully that is less of a lift for them. But I'll know probably by November, December, what time.
Anything else?
Nothing else at this time.
Excellent. Thank you. We have no minutes to approve, so that's good. Does anybody have any committee reports they're just dying to tell us about? I will just reiterate that the Master Plan Steering Committee is going to be putting together their website. It should hopefully be live within the next week or so. Again, that is Lunenburg.com, which will have information as well as surveys and whatnot, and they will be at Shrieks and Creeks. They will be at the parade and homecoming parade to give out some information as well. And then they're still planning to do a November 2nd, I believe. I believe it's November 2nd. Should be yes, November 2nd, a Thursday, for a formal public meeting at the library. Otherwise, we'll be meeting again next week to finalize that, so we'll have more information the week after. Topics for future meetings. How can we make them shorter? Any announcements from the committee? Put it at the end just because of the public hearing. Nope. None as well. Any public comment from the committee?
I guess I would just say thank you to everyone that showed up tonight and spent, a long meeting with us, but we really only had like one meeting to kind of work through all these articles and then vote on them, so.
I would reiterate that for sure. So thank you to everyone for putting that together really quickly and coming to talk to us and for engaging in a good conversation, I believe, for ideally the betterment of the town. So thank you. Any public comment from the public? Dave? You sure?
Come on, one last time. Come on.
I can keep you here till midnight.
All right. Our upcoming meetings, we have two more scheduled meetings before the special town meeting on the 26th of October and the 9th of November. Depending upon where we're looking, we'll see about whether or not we need to actually meet for both of those days. I will keep you guys posted with that one. And then again, also I didn't put it on here, but on November 4th, on that Saturday, is the Associated Town Finance Committee meeting in Sharon. I've signed up for it. You can just bill directly to the town, which is wonderful, so you don't even have to put any money forward to get reimbursed. If you do decide to sign up, make sure you sign up as a member. We are paying members of the committee, so we get the discount. And then we have the special town meeting at 7 p.m. on November 14th at the Middle High School Auditorium. And with that, at 10:01, anybody want to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.